Then he told about the ancient sun worshippers who always look towards the sky. You not think strange that now the holy day is called Sunday? Half world calls this seventh day Sunday, and the other half called it by a word meaning market day, the day when man does not work, when he gathers together all results of his labours, he meets, he puts out his things, he looks at what he has done. Crocodile's tears flowed, and when we left the table he sits forward, his chin is sunk in his collar, his eyes are looking inwards, and there is an expression of indescribable sorrow on his face. He has gone away from us. Welcome to you wherever you may be on this, the third planet from the Sun. Wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling. Transubstantiate in me for my being. Amen. This week I have several passages. The last one is from the Chan Buddhist Xuyun, who talks about the decline of the Dharma. And maybe I'll read out the passage on Impressions by Hugh Ripman. I want to look again at the very famous passage that Gurdjieff made about knowledge and being, very well known, but there is more to be discovered deep in the heart of Gurdjieff's words. So let me begin with that. In almost every one of his lectures, G reverted to a theme which he evidently considered to be of the utmost importance, but which was very difficult for many of us to assimilate. There are two lines along which man's development proceeds, the line of knowledge and the line of being. In a right evolution, the line of knowledge and the line of being develop simultaneously, parallel to and helping one another. But if the line of knowledge gets too far ahead of the line of being, or if the line of being gets ahead of the line of knowledge, man's development goes wrong, and sooner or later it must come to a standstill. People understand what knowledge means, and they understand the possibility of different levels of knowledge. They understand that knowledge may be greater or lesser, that is to say, of one quality or of another quality. But they do not understand this in relation to being. Being for them means simply existence, to which is opposed just non-existence. They do not understand that being may be of very different levels and categories. Take, for instance, the being of a mineral and of a plant. It is a different being. The being of a plant and of an animal is again a different being. The being of an animal and of a man is a different being. But the being of two people can differ from one another more than the being of a mineral and of an animal. This is exactly what people do not understand, and they do not understand that knowledge depends on this being. Not only do they not understand this latter, but they definitely do not wish to understand it, and especially in Western culture. It is considered that a man may possess great knowledge. For example, he may be an able scientist, make discoveries, advance science, and at the same time he may be, and has a right to be, a petty, egoistic, cavilling, mean, envious, vain, naive, and absent-minded man. It seems to be considered here that a professor must always forget his umbrella everywhere. And yet it is his being. And people think that this knowledge does not depend on his being. People of Western culture put great value on the level of a man's knowledge, but they do not value the level of a man's being, and are not ashamed at the low level of their own being. They do not even understand what it means, and they do not understand that a man's knowledge depends on the level of his being. If knowledge gets far ahead of being, it becomes theoretical and abstract and inapplicable to life, or actually harmful, because instead of serving life and helping people the better to struggle with the difficulties they meet, it begins to complicate man's life, bring new difficulties into it, new troubles and calamities which were not there before. The reason for this is that knowledge which is not in accordance with being cannot be large enough or sufficiently suited to man's real needs. It will always be a knowledge of one thing together with ignorance of another thing, a knowledge of the detail without knowledge of the whole, a knowledge of the form without a knowledge of the essence. Such preponderance of knowledge over being is observed in present-day culture. The idea of the value and importance of the level of being is completely forgotten, and it is forgotten that the level of knowledge is determined by the level of being. Actually, at a given level of being, the possibilities of knowledge are limited and finite. Within the limits of a given being, the quality of knowledge cannot be changed, and the accumulation of information of one and the same nature within already known limits alone is possible. A change in the nature of knowledge is possible only with a change in the nature of being. Taken in itself, a man's being has many different sides. The most characteristic feature of a modern man is the absence of unity in him, and further, it may surprise you if I say that the chief feature of a modern man's being, which explains everything that is lacking in him, is his sleep. A modern man lives in sleep he is born, in sleep he dies. What knowledge can a sleeping man have? And if you think about it and at the same time remember that sleep is the chief feature of our being, it will at once become clear to you that if a man really wants knowledge, he must first of all think about how to wake, that is, how to change his being. Generally speaking, the balance between knowledge and being is even more important than a separate development of either one or the other. And a separate development of knowledge or of being is not desirable in any way, although it is precisely this one-sided development that often seems particularly attractive to people. If knowledge outweighs being, a man knows but has no power to do. It is useless knowledge. On the other hand, if being outweighs knowledge, a man has the power to do, but does not know what to do. The being he has acquired becomes aimless, and efforts made to attain it prove to be useless. In the history of humanity, there are known many examples when entire civilizations have perished because knowledge outweighed being, or being outweighed knowledge. The development of the line of knowledge without the line of being gives a weak yogi, that is to say, a man who knows a great deal but can do nothing. He is like a man without appreciation, a man for whom there is no difference between one kind of knowledge and another. And the development of the line of being without knowledge gives a stupid saint, that is, a man who can do a great deal, but who does not know what to do. There is no object to his being. And if he does anything, he acts in obedience to his subjective feelings, which may lead him greatly astray and cause him to commit grave mistakes. That is, to actually do the opposite of what he wants. In either case, both the weak yogi and the stupid saint are brought to a standstill. Neither the one nor the other can develop further. In order to understand this, and in general the nature of knowledge and the nature of being, as well as their interrelation, It is necessary to understand the relation of knowledge and being to understanding. Knowledge is one thing, understanding is another thing. People often confuse these concepts. Knowledge in itself does not give understanding, nor is understanding increased by an increase of knowledge alone. Understanding depends upon the relation of knowledge to being. Understanding is the resultant of knowledge and being. And knowledge and being must not diverge too far. Otherwise, understanding will prove to be far removed from either. And at the same time, the relation of knowledge to being does not change with a mere growth of knowledge. It changes only when being grows simultaneously with knowledge. In other words, understanding grows only with the growth of being. Fundamentally, life is a living current that occurs between the positive and negative pole. In this case, it is represented by knowledge and being. And if they unify, the resultant is what is known as understanding. Understanding means action. Without understanding, there is no action. Neither knowledge nor being is action. It is the representation of the law of three inside a human being in relation to our fundamental life activity. It is what we are meant to do during our life. By the way, Gurdjieff mentions the problems with Western civilization. In my opinion, Gurdjieff was very Western himself, and he was not truly Eastern. The visceral part of this exposition that I want to get into is this connection between knowledge and being. I would say that people are very interested in getting their degrees and becoming an MBA in order to get money. And it's hard for people to really value anything properly, so they value money instead. Therefore, there is barely even something called knowledge. There is just economic manipulation. As you may know, I read out the same passages because I am trying to plant this knowledge deeper inside myself so that it starts to do things. Just reading it out once or twice, if it doesn't do anything, there has to be a kind of existential engagement with it. I have to be willing to be changed by reading it, to be touched by it. Then it will do something. The two poles of knowledge and being are described as these two lines, but the secret is to make them connect. There has to be this percolating inside the inner layers of the earth until there's a sort of a meeting somewhere inside, just like lightning appears suddenly, but actually there has been a secret inner meeting that has developed over time in a kind of a inner ladder. And somewhere inside, the two sides have met and touched each other. And then you have this sense of being able to do something, of the knowledge changing what the body does. Ultimately, everything changes with being, or it is the body. It is actually the body that is your level. On the street, do people see the difference in the being? Somebody lives in a nice house, somebody lives in a not nice house. Some people read books and some people go to the gym. Ordinarily, that is according to man 1, 2 and 3. It is a mechanical process. Being refers to subtle qualities of maturity, of morality, of flexibility. of standing next to somebody who may actually do something. I suppose these things could be seen if you were looking. Gurdjieff says that a modern man lives in sleep, by which he means something very specific, which is that the soul is not commanding the actions of that being. What is commanding it is a strange mixture that seems to be unique on this planet, according to Gurdjieff anyway. The first thing is that people live in a background process, which is the herd mind. If you don't do anything, if you just conform, then you're part of the herd. And in that way, you may be an honourable person, but you're not living on the bleeding edge of your soul. So that's the first way. The second thing, which is unique, is the massive growth of the false self, which is the sort of hallucinatory, technicolor personalities that people have with very, very bright and strange ideas that don't actually represent what is in their heart, if I can put it that way. And this creature that is presented to you, often when you speak to somebody, is mechanical in a strange way. It is mechanical not in a quiet way of the herd. It is mechanical in a very noisy way, but equally does not represent the heart of a person, and often is attracted, as Gurdjieff says, to one-sided development and anything that is zany, anything that is completely contradictory to the heart and to the simple course of life is what is attractive for the false self, which is, as I have said, not entirely false, because you experience a unique composition which is connected energetically to your inner structure. In any case, the guidance, of course, is to keep our ideas close to our hand. One idea, one action, and slowly grow like that. That is the best life. That is right living. I've been doing a lot of trauma work this week, and it's been as devastating as it always is. Seeing things that are inside of me. Yes, it is possible that every piece of shit that ever landed on me was in fact completely my responsibility and was simply drawn to me by the call of the deep darkness within. To the extent that, whether I like it or not, I may have seriously harmed people, or even my whole family. Yes, it is possible. And the corollary of that is that if you were able to change it, then the outside would also reflect. Let me read something from Mr. Ripman's book about impressions. You must remember what Gurdjieff said about the way in which impressions are received. This doesn't only apply to the impressions brought to us from the outside through our senses, it also applies to inward impressions. What self-remembering does is to enhance and deepen the reception of impressions. When I remember myself, impressions get taken in and are received on the rolls of the centers in a different way, and so they are remembered in a different way. But one forgets this, and it's extremely important. If I want to remember something and be sure that I remember, then it's not a question of making some kind of effort or strain with my mind. It's a question of preparing something, making something valuable open deep inside of me to receive that at the moment. And if it's received there, it's kept there. Subsequently, if one wishes to come back to this again, if one tries to come back to it without first making the fundamental effort to remember oneself, and one can remember that one had these thoughts and feelings, but one cannot recapture the taste of them. If one climbs back to the same place in oneself where one was when one first received these impressions, they're there, alive and vivid and fresh. It is said that if we develop in the right way, we are capable of receiving impressions of a much finer, much more subtle character coming from higher levels in the whole hierarchy of creation. But this depends entirely on what we have refined inside ourselves by the alchemical process which goes on. And it will not happen at all unless we are able to save energy over and above what we use for the necessary purpose of maintaining our organism, and to refine that further by our inner work. It is said, you remember, that our ordinary impressions are the materiality symbolized by the words hydrogen 48. It is said also, of course, that there are many impressions which are never received at all, which just slide off us like water off a duck's back. But it is also said that we are capable of receiving finer impressions of the order of materiality, which is symbolized by hydrogen 24, 12, or even hydrogen 6. Now one has no idea what this means until one tastes it. It is quite impossible to explain this or make words about it because it is quite a different order of experience. I wonder if there is anything you could say about the substances of the second body that I could understand or experience. The trouble is that when one is talking about the substances required to build the second body, one is talking about substances of such a fine and subtle nature that they cannot affect any of our present instruments. One has to start in that direction by experiencing the fact that one is not one's physical body. At the same time, one has to realize in practice that one has a limited capacity for experiencing impressions, and normally this limited capacity is monopolized and totally taken up by the impact of impressions and the associations that sense impressions arouse in memory, thought and emotion. And it's not only the impact of sense impressions but also the random memories that arise and set off mental and emotional associations. It's partly also concerned with the fact that we are brought up to feel, and we come to feel that it's natural to feel that the world which is presented to us by our senses is the real world, and that this is all there is to the real world. Ripman is talking about trying to get that high energy impression straight into you with a certain kind of focusing and self-remembering. But this is not really what Gurdjieff taught. Gurdjieff taught that it was the lower centers that were surprisingly the cause of the problems for human beings. In other words, it was our ordinary life where we needed to concentrate. That would shock people because they always think about spirituality being something very lofty. It is lofty, like the peak of a mountain is lofty, but the peak of a mountain is not the only part of the mountain, you know. Before you're qualified to walk at the heights, you have to walk at the lows. Before you can put the roof on a house, you have to put the foundation deep down in the earth where it's filthy. And the better the foundation is, the better the walls are. The better the walls are, the better the roof is. And the better the roof is, the more beautiful a weather vane you can stick on the summit. Most fourth way people today continue to make the same error. They talk about self-remembering and getting the high energy, etc. They don't talk about the donkey work. The donkey work is not the only thing, but it is the majority. Most of what is called spiritual conversation today is from people who are not properly grounded in reality. It is, in other words, coffee shop conversation. Xuyun was a Chinese Zen Buddhist called Chan Buddhist. He wrote something about the decline of the Dharma. He said, "Many people believe today that Confucian scholars betray the teachings of Confucius and that Buddhist monastics betray the teachings of the Buddha, despite the fact that in antiquity the teachings of both these schools were correctly followed and respected. However, it is well known that for Buddhism this is the Dharma ending age, and that as a consequence the correct practice of the Buddhist teachings are in danger of dying out amongst the people of China and the world. This is because those who follow a corrupt dharmic path are directly responsible for the destruction of the true and authentic Dharma. The Buddhist teachings are on the brink of extinction, and I have been asked today by Buddhist monastics to answer their questions and clearly distinguish the true Buddha from false Dharma." Shakyamuni Buddha transmitted the true Dharma, and in so doing distinguished 3 distinct time periods. Each of the 3 periods represents 1,000 years of Dharma transmission. With each passing of 1,000 years of time, the Dharma diminishes in strength and clarity and loses a part of its transformative power. In this Dharma ending age, it is already true that 982 years have already passed in the final stage of 1,000 years. During this time, ordinary beings are losing their way. They do not know how to acquire the true Dharma, and yet more and more people are turning to the Buddha Dharma for guidance and support. The ancient Buddha Dharma has been venerated for a long time, and even within this Dharma ending age there still exists positive aspects, but these are under threat from the general degeneration of the Buddhist practice. People misunderstand the true Dharma and apply the Buddhist teachings incorrectly. At this time, some ordained monastics get married and change their robes for the white clothing of a lay person. This is true even of monastics holding seats of high authority, who through their white clothing are indistinguishable from the laity, whilst monks who follow the Dharma are relegated to low seats of authority. This behavior exists in the world today because we have entered the Dharma ending age. In the last 30 years, the Mahayana teachings will disappear. In the last 20 years, the Hinayana teachings will disappear. Whilst in the last 10 years, the only practice will be the chanting of the 6 syllables of the mantra of Amitabha Buddha, Namo Emi Tuo Fo. Although I, Xuyun, am an old monk with little ability, I managed, through speaking the truth, to uphold for a time the Buddha Dharma and prevent its destruction through unnecessary political reform. 1953. Recently I've noticed that throughout Europe, particularly in formerly Catholic France and Spain, there are very many Tibetan centres opening up, particularly Tibetan Buddhism. Don't ask me why. And I find many of their spokespersons to have far too bright a smile for my heart to be satisfied. In the rest of the discourse, he discusses how at a meeting of venerable Buddhists, they argued over the small details of the particular birthday of Buddha. I think that means that they wanted to somehow go back to the origin. You know, in Gurdjieff's teachings, how they always talk about the origin of the teaching, where it came from, which particular part of the world. They talk like that because it sounds estimable. And Xuyun says that Buddhist monastics of this era want the true Dharma, the authentic Dharma, pointed out to them. Each Dharma is simply a consciousness and a circulation. It is a way of experiencing yourself and a work or techniques and a culture. Each society is like that. British society at this time has a certain rhythm. There's a certain kind of knowledge in people's minds with expectation. There's a certain kind of work with the hands. There's a certain energetic cycle. It is like an engine that is shared from the people to the knowledge to the outside society that they have conjured for themselves. That is partly from the past and partly from today. That is what they do. That is how they live. In a different era, like in the 1980s, certainly, there was a particular kind of energy circulation that was different kind of knowledge, different kind of people. Okay, I will leave it there. Thank you very much once again for troubling yourself to listen to an old monk with little ability. I wish you well.
Viendo que yo soy